We're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the City of Bloomington. And if everyone will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Mathey.
Here.
Councilmember Bolin. Councilmember Mwambwe.
Present.
Councilmember Emig.
Present.
Councilmember Painter. Here. Councilmember Black. Here. Councilmember Crable. Here. Councilmember Bray. Here. Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. We're going to start with one of the...
If we could, sorry. Jen is on the line.
Oh, Jen is on the line.
She's participating remotely for work purposes.
Okay. Jen, can you hear us?
I can.
Oh, okay. Cool. Is there a motion to allow Alderwoman Alderwoman Carrillo to participate virtually? All right.
So moved.
That's the worst thing I do tonight. That'll be okay. Moved by Councilmember Mathey, second by Councilmember Crable. And Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Thank you. Councilmember Mathey?
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin?
Yes.
Councilmember Mwambwe?
C.
Councilmember Emig?
Yes.
Councilmember Painter?
Yes.
Councilmember Black? Yes. Councilmember Crable?
Yes.
Councilmember Bray? Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Jen, you're legit. Can you hear us still?
Yes, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. We're going to move right along here to our first item under recognitions and appointments. President of the City of Bloomington Police Department Officer's Commission Certificate to Officer Freshour upon his completion of an 18-month probation by the Police Department. There they are. I knew Bloomington's finest were out in the audience there. And please feel free to come on up here, those of you behind us. If nothing else, it'll make us feel really, really safe. Yeah. Thank you. And before I go any further, I want to thank all of you again for all of what you do. We very much appreciate it, and on behalf of the entire community, and you as well, Chief, as our leader. First, we have a Police Officers Commission by authority of the Board of the Fire and Police Commissioners by the City of Bloomington and the County of McLean, the State of Illinois. We have Alex Freshour, having been duly sworn, was appointed and commissioned as a police officer on the 24th of February, 2020. It's in past tense, but that is today. As evidence thereof, we set our hand and seal. So I'm going to go ahead and give this to you, Chief, and if you will go ahead and present it to Alex. Thanks.
Okay, yes, and 1 second before I do this, I just wanted to take a moment to share some information with everyone. First of all, I'd like to kind of introduce and reintroduce these two gentlemen. This is Assistant Chief Chad Walmsley. He's Office of Professional Standards. And this is Assistant Chief Tim McCoy. He's our Assistant Chief over Operations. He and I were hired on the same day, March 7th, 1994. So, and I'd also like to acknowledge all the officers that are here present, because here's the bottom line. They're the ones that do the work, okay? They're the ones that takes the call for service. The reason why we have low crime in Bloomington and why we have a good relationship with our community is because of the work that they do. We don't take the calls. They do. So we very much appreciate everything that they do and appreciate them coming tonight. But tonight is about Officer Alex Freshour, which is standing right here next to me. And Alex's parents came tonight. They're back here, John and Christine. And I gave them invitation to know about Alex tonight, about his finding his way tonight. And
feel free to the parents, feel free to come on up and take embarrassing pictures from a variety of angles.
So a little bit of information about Alex. Not a ton here, but he was hired on August 13th, 2018. And prior to coming to Bloomington, he actually worked at the McLean County Sheriff's Department for about 4 years. So he had some experience before he came here. He attended Olympia High School, and he went to Wichita State University, where he majored in sports management and ran track. So, he's very much in shape and believes in that. While off duty, he enjoys hunting and fishing as his personal stuff. But I will just tell you personally, we feel very fortunate to have Alex on our police department. He's an outstanding person. He knows the job well. He executes law enforcement, but with compassion and understanding for the people that he's dealing with. So we feel very lucky to have him. So that being said, Alex, I'd like to issue this police officer's commission, coming off probation and officially become an officer. Thank you. Now, city clerk will come up and
You'll raise your right hand. And when I pause, that's I and pause, and you pause your hand. And repeat after me, okay? I,
Alex Freshow,
having been appointed to the office of police officer in the city of Bloomington, in the county of McLean, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of police officer according to the best of my ability, so help me God. Thank you. And I just want to say I think he's done the best so far. That's the smoothest one of these has probably ever done, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again so much. Next, we move to public comment. We have 3 members of public comment. And just to clarify, if you have some specific questions and want interaction between us, I do have the mayor's open house every 2 weeks, which is kind of a little mini town hall meeting, and sometimes it's very mini. We only had like about 4 or 5 of us here the other day, I think, including myself and Mr. Gleason. But we can try to get you answers on the spot if possible. But if you want to make comments without any response from us, that's our policy. We have public comment, and we have 3 individuals, and each has up to 3 minutes. And they are in the order that I have received them, Mr. Gary Lambert, Mr. John Reed, and Mr. Scott Steinley. So we'll start out with Gary.
Good evening. Last week, there was some discussion about concern for the rising credit card fees for paying the utility bills. And I think they said it was 3%. I'd be interested in knowing what it costs to pay for the staff and to receive that in person. And I'd just like to remind everyone, every year those fees go up 3%. So you might want to take a look at that. Social Security went up this year to 1.6%. And then you're taxed on a good portion of that. And I believe the city even taxes a portion of the utility fees. So not only do we have a 3% increase every year, we have to pay an increased fee. Another topic. couple of years ago, a gentleman from Parks and Rec put forth a business proposal for putting in the snack bar or whatever it's called. And based on that, the council approved borrowing about $1 million to fund that. And it may be out there somewhere. I don't know where to look. But at some point in time in this budget process, I'd be interested in hearing what's the results of that. Is it, in fact, performing close to what his proposal was? But maybe somewhere in the budget presentations that'll come out. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Next we go to Mr. John Reed and then Scott Steinley.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Gleason. You both met with me Friday at the open house. You both know what this is about. I do live in Ward 1 at the bottom of the hill on Lowe Street. Mr. Matthew, you probably know what this is about also because I spoke with you. Evidently, since 2015 or before, according to previous aldermen, there have been issues with the storm sewer backing into residents' basements. Having done some research, 2 people to the left of me, 3 people to the right of me, one on the other side of Bissell have had issues going on for as long as they've lived there. December, when we got 3 inches of rain, and I showed you the pictures, Mr. Renner, Mr. Gleason, you saw them also, I ended up with 7 inches of water in my basement. Now I have an option. I can put a valve, but when it rains, I can't use any water in my house. Not exactly a situation I want to go with. Now, in all fairness, I do rent. My landlord's here tonight. He's been very helpful in helping me get water out of my basement. I haven't been down my basement yet today. I'm hoping there's no water in it when I get home. But having spoken with 2 city employees that came out on that Saturday, who proceeded to tell me that the issue the city knows about, and it's been ongoing for years, ever since Stark did some work on Lowe Street, I sort of feel it's the city's responsibility to take care of the issue, one way or the other. Now, again, in all fairness, I do have a storm sewer running right down the middle of my driveway. As I can attest, there's a manhole cover that I drive over every day getting in my driveway. So I'm hoping the city can do something about this fairly quickly before it happens again. I also found out that the sewer from the house was replaced in 2015 to the storm sewer, inspected and permitted by the city of Bloomington. In June of 15 by Capodice, they did the work. And in May of 19, there was a $10,000 flood damage claim before I moved in for that same piece of property. So it can get rather severe. Thankfully, I didn't lose any appliances. It does explain why there's a new water heater, new furnace in the house. But I do not want to see that happen again. So I definitely would appreciate any help and some prompt responses. I know you did send me a text on Sunday. I appreciate that. Didn't have to do it on Sunday. I know you told me Mr. Gleason was looking into it, and I hope I get a response soon. With that, thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Next, Mr. Steinley.
Scott Steinley, Ward 5. I've got a problem with the streets, with the storm drains. There have been, the curbs are flush with the grass, and there is absolutely positively no excuse for this. If this was kept up a little each year, we would not be in crisis mode. The taxes I've seen do nothing but go up. As the former gentleman was speaking, there is absolutely no excuse. There's the motor fuel, the local motor fuel tax. There's a state tax. There's a federal tax. You know, there's a home rule tax on the sales tax. There's a sales tax, state sales tax. You people are going to get it to the point where nobody can afford to live in Bloomington. Maybe that's what you're trying to do, Terry. I don't know. But, you know, this is absolutely, what's next? I mean, I don't want to give you people any ideas or you'll dream up some more ideas. When there's nobody in administration, it's up to administration to see there is a person in there to answer that phone. Now, I know that may come as a real shock to you and to Tim and everybody in there. But I'm sorry, Terry. This is the city of Bloomington. This is not Illinois Westland. And maybe you need to realize, hey, I do serve the people. It's not a private university. It's a public taxing body. And what about the P card? Do you remember that, Terry? I know I keep bringing it up every cotton picking time, and I'll keep beating a dead horse until the horse dies. But I don't think you get it. You think it's funny, and I don't. Terry, if you'd have done that in private business, there are a lot of places that would have fired you. Hope you'll get voted out next time. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move to the consent agenda. Are there any items that members of the council would like to have separately removed? And I will be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended for 7D that is presented in front of you.
If I could,
Please.
item, let's see, 7B, Council Member Crable has asked that a sentence be added to the legislative update minutes regarding, it's on page 3, it would be regarding funding that was discussed. So it's a single sentence, just noting that funding requests made by the city were modest, doable, and would have significant impact on the city. Generally with minutes, as we know, they're summary minutes, so we don't tend to make minor edits like that, but seeing that these were legislative minutes, I discussed with City Manager Gleason, and we're going to go ahead and move forward with that. So if when we have a motion, if we could just also add that the amendment be considered, that'd be great. Thank you.
So essentially what I would be looking for, unless there's other items to be pulled, would be a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the amendments for 7B and 7D that are in front of us.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Matthey. Is there a second?
Second.
Excuse me. A second by Alderman Milawambwe. Any further discussion? If everyone can go ahead and vote. Excuse me. Councilmember Councilmember Carrillo, how do you vote? Jen?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. We're going to go ahead and move right along then to our regular agenda. And the first item under our regular agenda is item 8A, presentation by the U.S. Census Bureau regarding the 2020 census, purpose, process, and timeline as requested by the administration. So we have about a 20-minute presentation and up to about a 20-minute council discussion. And again, as Mayor, just to clarify for everybody, it's really critical that we respond not just for representation in Congress, representation in state legislatures, but even within our community, finding out where people are, what kinds of demographics there are in different areas, so we have different ways of delivering public services for the next decade. So it's really critical for everyone to make sure that you're counted. And at that point, I will turn it over to Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is something that we've been talking about, we'll be talking about quite a bit. Nora, if you would come down, I'm going to have her kick this off. She's sort of running the lead for the city, and going to give her a couple, 3 minutes to talk about some of the things that she's already done. Then we'll get this turned over to for the presentation. Nora?
Thank you. So as City Manager Gleason indicated, this is a very important, and the Mayor indicated, very important, crucial thing for the city and our community. Myself and other staff members have been participating in the Complete Count Committee with McLean County Regional Planning, who's here this evening. And between the town of Normal, the city of Bloomington, the county, and several other agencies, I think you'll see a great outreach effort to make sure people understand the importance of the census, the timeline for completing it, some important distinctions for this census. One key one is that this is the first time the census will be available online, to complete online. Census Day is April 1st, which I'm sure Ms. Riley will talk about a little bit more in her presentation. But if you do complete that census online, you will avoid a home visit from a census worker, which I think is a great selling point for people this year. So like I said, we'll be doing a lot of outreach. It'll be census, census, census all the time. It already kind of is. and we're excited to get a great count. Another important statistic that, again, I think Ms. Riley will talk about is that for every one person that does not complete the census in the community loses $17,000 over 10 years. So those are significant dollars that we might be missing out on. So with that, thank you. Ms. Riley, I'll turn the podium over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Carol Riley. I'm a Senior Partnership Specialist with the 2020 Census, working in our Chicago Regional Office. I have worked with the census for the last, since the last census, so about 10 years, doing different activities. We want to avoid doing a special census, of course, and so this is our key opportunity to make certain we count everyone once, only once and in the right place, and make certain we get the dollars for that. The numbers I have up on the screen, I often start off my presentations. 36 is the number of days before April 1st. We have 36 days before April 1st. 17 is the number of days before the people of your city will start to see materials come in their mail, their first chance to respond to the census, which will be March 12th is when we start to mail. 18 is the number of congressmen Illinois currently has. Every year, every census for the last 4 censuses, we have lost a congressman. We have lost one. We're concerned that we will lose 1 or possibly 2 out of the state of Illinois based on how good we count this year. 15,000 is a fuzzy number. I know that Nora said 17,000. There are a lot of numbers running around out there. 15,000 is about the money that we account for each person in the state. It's a fuzzy number. I come out of economics. It's an algorithm that accounts monies that come to the state from the federal government for various programs. And of course, not everyone takes advantage of every program. Not everyone has someone in Head Start or is part of WIC or is part of Medicaid. So that's a little fuzzy number, but it's an accurate number, about 15,000. 3 is the number of ways that we allow people to respond. And 3 is really our mantra of the census is important to our community. It's easy, it's safe. Those are our 3 mantras for the census. There we go. We always start every presentation with a message from our director. Mrs. Sanders has been with the Bureau for 43 years. She is always available. If someone has a question, someone needs something, we invite you to reach out to her. She now covers 8 states in the Chicago region. There was great consolidation of the federal government. So she covers 8 states, which is more than 120 municipalities. So why the decennial census? As many of you know, this is constitutionally mandated that we count everyone residing in the states every 10 years. It apportions our 435 congressional seats and appropriates more than $675 billion in federal funding for things like schools, SNAP, WIC, planning for hospitals, determining eligibility for housing assistance, block grants, loans, building roads, bridges, all of these things that touch our community, which are important to your community. This is how we have to get people to complete the census, is that local message. Why is it important to our community? Oh, I keep clicking the wrong one. I'm so sorry, guys. So we talked about potential financial impact upon a city, and these are numbers that come from the Illinois Municipal League. This is an average number. So this is not particular to your city, but it gives you an idea of how things are allocated. Income tax, motor fuel tax, local use tax, personal property tax. These are things that come to the state on a per capita basis. If we miss one person, we miss $17,000 out of your city budget. If we miss 10 people over 10 years, it's $170,000. Miss 100, $170,000. So you can see how this multiplies and how important it is to our local community. We often want to talk about what the census is. What do we ask? Why are they so nosy? What do they need to know that for? In front of you, I believe you have a sheet, or there is a sheet available that talks about the very specific questions that we ask. We ask primarily about numbers. The decennial census is also known as the census of housing and population. We have gone out and we accounted for an inventory of every house, place where people could be living. And then we went out this summer and physically checked 50 million addresses. to make certain that they were there, that they were roof, windows, floors, and doors. That's how we count a habitable house. If a house was divided, if a house was raised, we updated that inventory of housing, and now we're in part 2, who is in that house? We don't know. Everything that will come to that house will be addressed resident of, because we do not know who is in that house. People are mobile, houses are not. We ask how many people are here on April 1st. Someone says, oh, I'm not, I don't usually live here on April 1st. We ask the question, April 1st is our snapshot, but the question very specifically says, where are you on April 1st? Is this where you normally live, normally sleep most of the time, so that we find them in the cities where they need the resources and where they will be accounted for. We count college students at the colleges because that is where they normally reside. We count snowbirds in Illinois because this is where they normally reside. So we ask about where they are living. We ask if the home is rented with a mortgage, without. Why? Because we're nosy? No. Because it helps us plan for affordability or for housing planning. What do we need more of? The planning community looks at that and says, oh, you know what, we have a dearth of apartments. We don't have enough, or we have too many. We need more single-family homes. It has to do with housing affordability. We ask for a phone number. Why? Because we want to call you? No. But in case we have a question about what you have sent us, if we receive 2 surveys from the same address, we're going to call and we're going to go, hey, did you not know that your husband had already done this? Or was there something different? So that's why we need the phone number. Then we ask name, gender, age, date of birth, race, and Hispanic origin. We ask that from one single person, and then we ask how the other people are related. Central person. That's my husband. It's my child. It's our foster child. It's a roommate. So we get a picture, a complete picture. What do we do with all that information? We take it, we data smooth it, we bring out the data in terms of numbers, and then we lock away any of the personally identifiable data for 72 years. 72 years. No one can see your name. No one will know it's you. The important thing also, besides the questions that we ask, are what we don't ask. We never ask Social Security numbers. We never ask citizenship. This was a big debate. It was eliminated. We do not ask the citizenship question. We do not ask mother's maiden name. We do not ask for income or bank information. We don't solicit a contribution to anything. We don't do anything that identifies with a political party. We want to count everyone. We don't want to throw up barriers to anyone. Oh, I don't believe in this policy or that policy. We need to count everyone. Under penalty of law, we never share any personally identifiable information with any other agency or group. Oh, there we go. We cannot, Title 32 prevents us from sharing information with ICE or a local sheriff, or even me talking to someone about your neighbor. Oh, you know, your neighbor is this age. This is her birthday coming up. I would go to jail. For 5 years, I would pay a penalty of $250,000 if I revealed in my lifetime any personally identifiable information. So it's very secure. It's triple encrypted. We are not, our system is separate from all other federal agencies. We want to talk about the mailing. So I said April 1st is Census Day. March 12th, we start mailing out. Our first line of defense is an invitation to go online, to fill out the information online. It's the first time we're allowing people to go online. The website, my2020census.gov, will open on March 12th. It will be open through August. We will continue to encourage people to go online to give us the information. Why? Then no one's asking them any questions. No one's coming to their door. Complete the census in the privacy of your home or at the library where no one's going to bother you. You give us your answers. We're not going to challenge your answers. We're going to ask you to give us complete information, and we know that going online is the best way. But if someone is unable to go online, they don't have internet, they're not comfortable on the computer, we have a phone number based on English and 12 other languages supported directly over the phone. Those phone lines are open from early in the morning till late at night because we cover the whole country. Anyone can go there, call us, they have a question, ask a question, and then go online. We have lots of different variety. So we send out the first letter of invitation, we send out a reminder letter, we send out a postcard. The fourth mailing we do, if we have not heard from you yet, you have not, from the campaigns that have been done, from our wooing, from every other source that you've been encouraged to participate, we will then mail a letter with the paper questionnaire, which someone can fill out in blue or black ink if that's what they prefer. They cannot call us and ask for a paper questionnaire. That has been going around. Oh, just call them up, they'll send you one. We cannot. Everything we do is geocoded to a specific address. There is a unique 12-digit number for that address, and we can't just willy-nilly send out a paper questionnaire. So they will get their paper questionnaire on in the middle of April, can complete it that way. We'll send one final postcard reminder. After that, we send people that we have hired locally to go to the houses of the people that have not responded. If we leave a notice on your door, can you still respond online? Sure you can, and then we won't come and bother you anymore. You can go online, you can go on the phone. I got this notice, this guy showed up, I know he's going to come back 5 times, 5. We keep knocking on the door, 5 times. After the 5th time, we will go to another source to try and get the information. Is that the best information? No, it is not, but it will give us a count. How many people are living next door? Do you know? Do you see them come and go? Oh, that house is vacant. Great. Now we can record that and move on. What can you all do? You are the trusted voices in this community. You have constituencies, you have friends, you have school, you have children. You go out and you tell them about the census, why it's important to our community. You have skin in this game, and that message from you is much more imperative and much more impactful than me coming and saying, oh, you should do the census, it's really important to your community. No, you use the my word. It's important to our community. It's important to your neighborhood. It's important to our city. We want to make certain we count everyone and not miss anyone. And now I will take questions.
Questions for council members? Comments? Councilmember Millimombley.
Okay, thank you so much for coming. I wanted to ask first about filling forms online. Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of security so that people feel more comfortable? Because
Absolutely.
Nowadays that's the big issue.
Yep. So our website is, we have hired cybersecurity experts throughout the country to try and break into our site. They have not broken into our site. We triple encrypt all of the information that we get. So when someone types in their information and hits send, we get that information encrypted. We download it encrypted, and then when we aggregate that data, it is once again encrypted so that no one can come and find you at your house. We want to know about you in terms of data collection, but we don't want to know about all of your business. So this triple encryption is what protects us. From the census perspective, when we're out collecting data, if we have to come to the home, we're on a secure network. We will not use open Wi-Fi, even if it's a secure network, a library network. We will use our own network so that we're behind the firewall. When I log into my computer, I have a 6-digit password that is supplemented with another 9-digit password that changes every minute. Every minute. If my phone is dead, I am dead in the water. I will not be able to get on my computer. So this prevents someone from getting into our system or picking up something and walking away with a tablet and getting into our system. They cannot do it without the RSA key.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Eman.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
I assume that the preference is to get as many people to go online as possible. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
And I assume, and I'm also assuming that you're working with partners locally to set up perhaps portals Can we consider using schools, even voting sites,
Yeah,
and
so
obviously
we're
the libraries, just to get folks access to those networks?
Yes, of course. And we have, we recently were given from Congress, awarded us an allocation of money to go into particularly hard-to-count neighborhoods, or something we call low LR, low response score areas. So we have history, and we know there are certain neighborhoods that maybe when we mailed to the 100 houses, maybe only 50% of them got the form, mailed it, completed it, and mailed it back to us. And that meant we had to go to those homes 4 or 5 times to try and get that data. In this community, it's often student housing. Surprise, surprise. But we have certain areas that we know, and so we are going to those areas with what we call our mobile questionnaire assistance centers, so that we know where people are gathered. We want to go where they are organically gathered, rather than asking them to take another step, come to the library or come to this school or come to this place on a special night. We would rather, oh, you're already gathering at this place, we will come to you and we will bring the census to you. And we're working right now on those plans of days when we will be. We are looking for help from our partners to say, you know, on Wednesday nights, this church has this gathering. It would be great, and it's in this neighborhood, it would be great for you to come, bring your tablets, and let's reach out to that community. So we're looking at things like that. Barber shops, beauty salons, laundromats are a great place for us. Why? Because people are standing around for hours waiting for their laundry to dry, and we know we will catch them. Students, this is how we're going to catch those students.
Thank you. Councilmember Craybill.
Thank you for coming. Really helpful information, and like you said, it's so very important to all communities and our community as well. With regard to the online, is there at some point when people are actually knocking on doors, will the online survey still be available for people?
Yes, so the online survey will be available through August 1st, because that's always our first line of defense. And we always will say, someone knocked on your door and you don't want them to return, now's your chance to go online and get it done, right? So that portal will always be open. I had a video, and I'm sorry that I don't have it to share with you right now, but I can share it out. I'll give it to Nora, and she can share it out with the council. It talks about what to expect when you go online and what you're going to look at. I don't have my 12-digit geocode. What do? Put in your address. How do we count homeless people? They don't have an address. We go to where we know that they are gathered. We're working with Continuum of Care so that we can go there. If they go get services at a food pantry, we will go to the food pantry to make certain that we can count those people. They need the resources more than anyone, right? So we're working with different groups. You didn't ask, but often people ask, how do we count in nursing homes? How do we count college dorms? We work with those facilities, and they upload that residential data to us so that we don't have to, it would be very disruptive in a memory care facility, say, if we showed up and started asking people, well, what's your name and when's your birthday? So they upload, that's an option for them to upload that data for us. The university will upload student data for us so that we can get that. But, you know, we will do our very best to count every single person and encourage them to go online so that we have real data. And the thing that will be interesting for you all is that you will be able to track our progress within your tracks of your city. I want to say it's real time. It's not going to be that instantaneous, but it may be a one-day lag that you'll be able to go into an area and go, oh, this track is performing really well. Look, we're almost all in blue. Oh, this track we have an issue with. This allows us to then deploy resources to a track that maybe we're having issues with. Maybe they don't have internet connectivity. Maybe they didn't get the Maybe they didn't know anything about it. But it allows us to make decisions so that we can approach those communities and get the count to where we need it to be.
Other question, Councilmember Craybill, excuse me, Painter.
Thank you. um,
Changing your name
I
today.
worked for the Census Bureau 40 years ago, and the one place that really people got very upset when we enumerated were the detox wards of the hospitals. Do you still do that?
We don't. We ask the hospital administrators to give that data to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
We
good.
don't want to upset anyone. You know, it's really up to the administrator to decide. We have 5 different ways that we'll approach that. And I remember my last census, we had nursing home administrators that decided we would be a great activity for their residents to have a visit with a census worker. And I learned a lot about grandchildren, canaries, the good old days of walking to school. But we will do it the best way for them that they feel is best for their facility.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Matthey.
Well, thank you for not calling me Councilmember Cribble. So thank you for the presentation. I thought one of the things I really liked about the presentation is you talked about the questions that you're not going to ask. And I think that that's important, especially with the number of various scams of different things that have been going on, that there's a list of things that people can be on the watch out for, that you're not going to ask any of those questions that would have the potential to compromise their fiscal safety. I just really appreciate you coming in. I think this is an important process. Also, just for the sake of everybody that might be watching or listening, the official site ends in a .gov, and that .gov is not like a .com. Nobody can register a .gov website unless they're actually part of the federal government. So there is no potential, if you're on a .org or anything else, don't stop filling stuff out. You have to be on a .gov, and only the government has the ability to create those websites. Nobody else can do that. So it's an additional layer of safety as well. So thank you.
You're welcome. One of the things I do want to address is that it has come up in meetings. The census will email me. We will not email you. We don't even know that you're in that house. We know an address, and we're trying to find out who's in the house. How in the world would we have your email? Oh, the census will call you. We will only call you after you've completed the survey and given us your phone number. We do not know who is in that house, and that's what we're trying to find out. So if someone says, I got a call from the census, immediately the response is, it's not from the census. I got an email from the census. You did not. You did not. We cannot email you.
Great. Anything else? Thank you so much. Obviously,
Thank
we're
you.
going to do what we can do to try to promote this so that we can get the most complete count possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We move right along to item 8B, consideration and action on classified non-union IMRF retirement awareness as requested by the Human Resources Department. And we have a brief 5-minute presentation, about 5-minute council discussion. Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will not need that long. There are 4 retirements and related payments that we need to disclose under the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act. The information the city is required to disclose is in the packet, and we also have slides with the required information for each employee. The first slide shows the information for Denise. She's a program manager in the Parks Department. Second slide is Joyce, another program manager in the Parks. Third slide, Carol Hare, that is administrative assistant in the police department. And Scott Sprouse is the fourth slide, director of information services. Happy to answer any questions.
Again, just to clarify, this is assuming that there's no sick leave or vacation used between now and, in the case of Scott, for example, April 30th. That is, so this is the maximum payout.
That's correct, Mayor. Yes.
Okay. Questions, comments? And at this point, you are requesting that we have a motion? Isn't this usually just for information? I'm sorry?
A recommended motion, informational only, as required pursuant to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act.
So, no motion. I'm sorry, you said no motion. Okay, that's what I thought.
No motion.
Okay. Councilmember Matthey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Tim, are these the final 4 that are going to be taking, that were the notification for that took the retirement prior to October 31st that we set up for last year?
I'm not sure that they're the final 4. Nicole? Are they the final? Well, just tell me right there. There are more coming.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, since this is information only, seeing no more other questions, we'll move on to item 8C, presentation of the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget. And again, this is the little deeper dive than what we talked about last week, as requested by the Finance Department. And so at this point, we just have a presentation and discussion only. And we're going to start with Mr. Gleason, Mr. Rappin.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Real quick under 8B, apologize for the recommended motion threw me as well in the agenda. This presentation that Scott Rathman, the Finance Director, is going to lead, very similar to what we presented at Committee of the Whole last week, totally by design. The request of the elected officials is to talk, in this case FY21, as much as we possibly can, and that's exactly what we're doing. This budget is also going to include some of the different directors that have an area of responsibility. They're going to get up and present as well. But for the most part, this is the presentation that was shared last week. Scott? Yeah. Thanks.
My guys. Thank you, everyone. As the city manager indicated, we have some very similar, if not the exact slides from last week, but with some additions. But before we launch, I just want to make the public aware that this presentation is online at this moment on the website. So if you want to navigate, if someone wants to navigate to it, probably the easiest route, there's a documents link along the top of the website, Finance Docs Budget FY 2021. So people can follow along at home. So no changes in the monetary levels of the budget, but this week we're going to be including some citywide exhibits, some different views of the budget split by function, so admin, parks, public safety, those functions within the general fund, and then from the citywide standpoint, we'll be showing those by fund. And then we're going to go through all the detail of the projects, and that's where the directors are going to come up and give you a little high-level explanation of those projects, kind of show the budget dollars at work. It's kind of what I've been trying to express is in terms of we have this huge monstrous budget. Well, what's it really doing? Well, we're hopefully providing the services that the community needs. So what does that boil down to? Projects. And then, we'll be running through some of those services. Some statistics that I'm hoping will have a little bit of a wow factor, that is really being executed by staff at the city level. So, having said that, same slide as last week. We're at 230, very slight increase over 20. I wanted to kind of roll back a little bit. 2019 to 2020 was the material change. The 2019 citywide budget was $210 million, and then it went up to $227.5 for 20. What was the material increase? Capital projects. So a lot of the funds had been accumulating reserves so that they could address projects, larger projects. State motor fuel tax is an example. In the past, really we were just receiving about $1.8 million a year. That's gone up with the state increase. I'll get to more of that later. But $1.8 million in 1 year does not accommodate a bridge project. So accumulating those reserves and addressing those projects in a year. So we had a significant increase last year. This year, as I've mentioned previously, a lot of those projects have rolled. There's some different ones. We're going to be going through those. But that's why it's a pretty flat year-over-year increase or trajectory for the budget. The general fund, 109 the prior year. It was 104 in 2019. So what was the material increase there? Well, locomotive fuel tax. We doubled that for 20, so that added $2.3 million. So of the roughly $5 million increase between 19 and 20, Local motor fuel tax, $2.3 million of that. We brought the billing department into the finance department, into the general fund. It was in the water fund before. So grossed up our budget by a little under $1 million. Those dollars do get allocated back out to enterprise funds, but that was the other material change. So 109 to 110, just some slight increases, revenue increases. What I mentioned last week, the favorable revenue trends that we've realized in 20 has translated nicely into 21. We're going to be able to do $650,000 in cash for equipment. Last year it was just a little over $500,000. And then, of course, more capital projects. Major tax revenues. Went through this last week. The only things really to highlight, same reduction in telecom. That's brought that utility tax down. The utility tax revenue category, the important aspect of that is a good portion of that is related to the increase we enacted in 2016 for pensions. So every time we realize a decrease in that, we're decreasing the funds available for our public safety pensions. General fund revenues. Went through this slide last week. So if I'm going to kind of move fast because I want to save time for the directors on the projects. So I'm trying to take a little different angle on highlighting. So $110 million in total revenues proposed for 21. You can see in the second line, we have $90 million in major tax revenues. The line above it, $786,000 in use of fund balance, use of reserves. So what does that leave out of $110 million? Well, that's approximately $20 million of funds that are being created by services within the general fund. Now there's transfers and things of that nature in there, but I just want to highlight maybe a little different view. There are a lot of general fund expenses that are being covered by general fund activities, specifically parks, the fire department with the ambulance services, that kind of thing. So just wanted to highlight that, maybe a little different perspective on the revenues there. Expenses. As I mentioned last week, benefits, the material increase, IMRF, the contractuals, the majority of that decrease was related to the legal restructure, $250,000 savings to the city related to that restructure. It shifted some expense from between categories. And then, of course, we had a budget amendment come through a couple months ago related to salt increases in commodities. But what I really wanted to do is get to this general fund by function. So this kind of highlights where the dollars, $110 million, is allocated through the general fund. Now, some of these numbers, you have to take them in context. I'm going to highlight Parks and Rec, $11.8 million there. Now, they generate approximately $3.6 million in service fees. Now, as part of the Parks and Rec Department, BCPA. So, and the BCPA has a bond in it. Revenues are placed into the BCPA department, sales tax revenues, for that bond. So their departmental expenses are grossed up. But even just in netting out the bonds, and with their 3.6, they're 30% to 40% funded on their expenditures. Economic development and community development. This line, $1.2 million, $1.5 million of dollars is funded by fees. Enterprise fund subsidy transfer, $1.2 million. I wanted to highlight that. I've mentioned in previous presentations that the golf fund is going to need a subsidy for 21. So there's a transfer to the golf fund of approximately $130,000. The remainder of that subsidy is to the arena for maintenance. And this, just to kind of graphically show the allocation of the expenditures for the general fund, put this in. It's a little redundant from the previous slide, but you can see, not a majority, but half of the general fund budget is dedicated to public safety at 56.5%. Citywide revenues. it's a large number, $230 million. So how do you distill that? What to emphasize? One thing I want to go over is this use of fund balance. It's the use of reserves. It's our way of showing a balanced budget. So we're using savings. It's not like cash is coming in. So $18.6 million is not cash coming in. That's using of reserves. So that's how we always end up with revenues matching expenses. I get that question a lot. How do you always balance? You know, your budget's always zero. That doesn't make sense to me. Well, it's because we use reserves when necessary to balance the budget. Now, that $18.6 million, most of it's coming from the enterprise funds for those capital projects and the state motor fuel tax fund. I want to highlight the note there, decrease in motor fuel tax due to increased state revenues. That might sound a little at odds with the way that statement is working, but what happened there was in the state motor fuel tax fund, with the projects that were planned, to cover those projects, we were going to have to use fund balance. Now, a majority of those projects got rolled to 21. Well, what happened with the state budget last year? They doubled the gas tax from 19 cents to 38 cents. We didn't double our take of the motor fuel tax, but it went up by about 60%, about $1.2 million annually. So we have additional revenues coming into motor fuel tax for 21, same projects budgeted. We don't have to use as much of the reserves. So you can see if you look down at this intergovernmental revenue line, that's gone up by $2.5 million. $1.2 million of that is the state motor fuel tax. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that the decrease in our use of fund balance has been offset by increase in the revenues in motor fuel tax. Expenditures. $1.1 million increase in benefits. Almost 100% of that's related to IMRF rate. Capital expenditures, $3.7 million decrease. Water projects decrease of 2.6, but we did have equipment decrease year over year of 1.7 million. And then here's a table of the citywide budget expenditures by fund. The general fund, you can see, ties to the exhibits that we just went through, the 110 million. Water, 25 million. And you can see all the way down. I've combined the capital projects funds, so that's going to be your capital improvement fund, your asphalt and concrete fund, and your motor fuel tax fund into one. So 29.5 million right there. In the enterprise, we budget the capital projects of enterprise funds are budgeted within those funds, so they're not broken out. The insurance, internal service funds, that's a big number. So I'm anticipating a question there, so I'm just going to try to explain that from a very high level. Our health insurance fund, casualty insurance, let me highlight the health insurance. So we have an accounting fund set up. So the employees contribute 25% of health insurance. The city contributes 75%. Basically, those expenses hit the departments, and the offset goes down into the internal service fund, the insurance fund, and then we pay it out. We pay those premiums out of that fund. So it's kind of an accounting transaction. It's really a transfer for the most part, but it's a very large number, so I wanted to highlight that activity. And here's a graphical representation of the split by fund. So now, I'd like to move into, that was kind of like the accounting side, the numbers from a very high level. What are those dollars going to mean to the public? So we're going to run through the capital projects by responsibility, director responsibility, and I'm going to get a little bit of overview. If you have questions, I would suggest that you go ahead and ask them while the director is up here instead of waiting until the end and having people come back up. So I'd like to introduce, to go over the parking, the first three items, Russ Waller, the facilities director. Russ?
Thank you, Scott. As Scott said, I'm going to go over the facilities, and all of the capital projects, fiscal 21 proposed capital projects for facilities are parking garages. Many of you probably know most of this, but I'm going to go ahead and just give a quick review of each garage, kind of give you some of the statistics on it, a little bit of description, go over some maybe a really high-level history of the work that's been done on each of those garages, and then give you a little explanation of the work that we're proposing for the current, or proposed 21 fiscal year. So first is the police parking garage. It's a three-level garage, 150 total parking spaces in the combined three levels, and that is a high utilization garage, basically primarily used by the police department, and then the top level obviously used by customers coming to City Hall or the police department. Utilization of that is 95 to 100% during the work week, minimal use on the weekend. Facility, the entire police department facility, including the garage, was built in 1998. The first major work that was done was in 2004. They did a top-level sealant just to keep some of the moisture and stuff out of the level of the garages. The next work that was done in that garage was done in 2012, and that was actually a major rehabilitation of the entire top level. Essentially, they more or less replaced the entire top level of that garage. And then I'm skipping over a lot of the minor type of work, but additional work that includes fire suppressor replacement, lighting improvements. Those I'm skipping over. I'm kind of primarily talking about the major structural work that's been done on each of the facilities. So it's been 8 years since any work, essentially, major work has been done on the structure for that facility. So for the proposed 21 budget, we're looking at an entire rehabilitation of the full garage. Like I said, in 2012, they just worked on the top level. Nothing was done on the two lower levels. So we are, once again, doing more work on the top level, but then going down to each level below it and doing some rehabilitation work on that. Just like you have with the streets, and then this kind of is a summary of all garages, so I probably won't repeat this again, but it's affected by the weather, the traffic that's on it, similar to the streets, and so your key on any kind of restoration work for garages is to try to keep that moisture out of the garage. So a lot of the work there in the police department garage is primarily doing some sealant replacements, repairing the joints between the precast members just to keep that moisture out. The structure itself is in really good condition, and there are some minor structural rehabilitation that needs to be done on the PD garage, but most of the work that you're going to see is with drainage and sealing. Moving on then to the arena garage. Arena garage, three-level garage, 260 parking spaces. That one has probably minimal utilization. It's about 30% utilized during the normal work week, during your normal time, and that's just people coming to the Bloomington Ice Center and issues at the arena. Most of utilization for that facility is for the arena events. During arena events, it's 95 to 100% utilized. Built in 2005, 2006, right after the construction of the arena, and then minimal work, essentially next to nothing was done on that until 2014 when they discovered an issue when they did an overall evaluation of the facility. Major structural rehabilitation was done in 2014. Essentially nothing has been done since then, so we're looking at 6 years since the last time that was done. There again, the evaluation of we've had done on the garage, very good condition. It's probably one of the best conditions we have for all the garages combined. And so there, again, it's very minor structural work that we're proposing. A lot of the work is waterproofing, sealing, and drainage improvements. And then lastly, the most expensive one is Market Street Garage. That's a four-level facility, 550 parking spaces, so by far a lot more than the other two garages. That one is a highly utilized garage, about 80% utilization during the week. It's primarily, most of those are your monthly parking customers from downtown businesses. We also have a lease with the United States Postal Service in one corner of that garage. And that's a lot longer history, but I'll just kind of give you the highlights there. So built in 1974. The first major, and I'm sure some were done between this, but I don't have all of that history. So the first major structural repair that was in 2000. 2010 it started, 2000. They did some structural, waterproofing, sealing, and drainage repair. And then nothing was done for about 10 years. So in 2010 to 2013, there were three projects phased projects where major work was done on that facility. That included structural, life safety, drainage, just general waterproofing, sealing, essentially almost a full rehab of the entire facility. So 2013, jump ahead now, basically 7 years. We haven't done anything major in 7 years. We're kind of back to that, where now we have some major work that needs to be done on that. So the proposed work for fiscal year 21 is, just like I had said in 2013, 2010, is a lot of structural work, considerable structural repair needs to be done to it, and then a lot of drainage improvements. That facility, all the floor drains need to be replaced, entirely replaced. Several of the structures themselves need to be repaired or replaced, and then considerable just fixing and repairing the sealants and other seal coatings and stuff like that need to be done. That gives you the brief summary of that. Any questions you might have?
Actually, before we go to that, because we're well over budget in terms of the presentation segment, is there a motion to continue this for, let's say, an additional 10 minutes? Actually, maybe more than that, but let's start with 10 minutes since we still have several of the directors coming. Is there a motion to extend the presentation time?
Extend for 10 minutes.
Okay. Moved by Councilmember Matthews. Is there a second? Second. Second by several people. Councilmember Craybill, since I keep wanting to say his name tonight. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Matthew?
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin?
Yes.
Councilmember Mwambwe?
Yes.
Councilmember Emig?
Yes.
Councilmember Painter?
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo?
Yes.
Councilmember Black?
Yes.
Councilmember Crable?
Yes.
Councilmember Bray? Yes.
Okay. We got another clock starting. Questions, and I notice we've got a couple. Councilmember Matthew.
Thanks, Russ. Appreciate the report on the garages. So 1974 is the same year that I was born. And so at what point do we stop throwing money at this garage? I know we've seen proposals and stuff to do a bunch of work at various times, and at what point do we, 1.3 million, is this going to be 1.3 million this year, and then next year we're going to have to do more, then a couple more years down the road? At what point do we say, let's get this garage through a year, and then we'll do a major change, right? At what point is it time to take the garage down and put a new garage up? Where does that decision process come from, instead of just keeping throwing more money at it?
Excellent question, Councilmember Matthew. We're there. I believe at this point, the project that we have for Project 21, in my opinion, has to occur with 80% utilization of that garage. We either are going to have to do the repairs or find an alternate location to put those roughly 350 paid parking customers, which we could accommodate them in the Lincoln garage. I doubt, though, you're going to get too many. They're going to be happy walking from Lincoln garage back downtown to their place of business. So my opinion, we do need to go ahead with these repairs, but we also need to go ahead with planning on what we're going to do next. So the proposed repairs, based on the structural evaluation we've had done, if we move forward with these $1.3 million worth of repairs, will buy us another 5 to 7 years for that facility.
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
So that's where I think it's definitely worth that, and I think we definitely need to utilize that time to move forward with whatever we're going to do, either a replacement of that facility where it's at, building a new facility at an alternate location, so then that location can be repurposed to something else. I think we need to use this time that we're going to gain from these improvements to decide what we're going to do next and make that decision. In next year's budget, and I don't want to get too far ahead, this will be the fiscal 2022 budget, is where I'm proposing we would either hire consultants or whatever we're going to do to start evaluating what we should do for a new facility.
Okay. Thank you. That answered all the questions I hadn't yet asked. So.
Councilmember Mwambwe.
Funny thing, I had the exact same questions about that. And and since we're talking about a consultant and studies and things like that, I really wonder, are parking garages the best use of our money? Because I think, to me, it seems like it's a pretty expensive proposition. Isn't there a different way for us to do that, to provide parking?
Excellent question as well. Parking garages are extremely expensive. They rarely make up for the cost in building them. Rarely do you see that back, especially for the rates we're charging and the limited amount of time we're charging for them. So unfortunately, what you have to look at is you have to compare that to the amount of parking you can provide in a parking facility like that versus your flat surface parking. And so you have to look at it from a standpoint of available surface area. And quite honestly, downtown, we do not have that. The next closest facility that we have downtown to that would be the Douglas lots, which we purchased a couple of years ago. And I don't have the exact figure on top of my head, but you're talking total combined of the 3 lots is about 150 to 200 spaces. So that facility, that surface lot itself, wouldn't even accommodate what we have leased on a monthly basis in the market garage. So that's your big challenge there is yes, definitely worth investigating to see what we can do to accommodate surface parking. But when you're limited on space, which we are in the downtown, you're pretty limited on what kind of facility you can typically as a parking garage.
So, yes, I'm glad that we can investigate that. But what I'd like to also see is, how much we spent on parking lots over the years. Especially parking garages. That seems to me like a pretty big number. I mean, when I'm looking at this, $1.3 million for Market Street. So for 5 or 7 years worth of, extending the life of it, that's, to me, that it's what, 200,000? A little bit more? 300 almost? That's a lot per year.
I do have that data. I don't want to go into it today unless you really want to hear it. I have basically
I won't let you. So.
Yeah. But I'd be definitely willing to share that through city manager. He can get that information to you. For every one of the garages I talked about, I have essentially with the items I listed tonight or talked about tonight, I've got an expense associated with that in a table form that I could provide.
Okay, good. I'd like to see it. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Black and Craybill.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing, shedding some light on the conversation around our strategy with, potentially having to replace or, spend some money to make some repairs this year. As you were talking, it was like a little bit of deja vu because I feel like I had this conversation at least 3 times in the past, and we continue to dump money into this parking garage, and there's no doubt of the need for it. I mean, we have paying customers that are there. When you do First Fridays, it's filled to the brim with people. When I drive past it, there are people constantly coming and going out of there. So in my world, I don't want to spend any more money on this garage. I want it torn down and a new one built. And the idea of studying it for 5 years, I look in my crystal ball, I would imagine 5 years from now, if we just only spend $1 million, we're going to, just another few years. 1974, that's a long time. That's before Star Wars. For parking garages, of course, not for people. It's Jamie's birthday, so, it all comes full circle.
Oh, that just tells us how old he is today.
Yes. 31, right? So, yeah, I would just prefer to see us, it's going to be very hard for me to vote in favor of a budget that has more money devoted to this parking garage without some back-end strategy immediately taking effect. I would actually prefer for us to, right now, get the plan in place, hire the architect, do what we got to do, tear it down and rebuild it, because that is an underutilized space. There's a lot of opportunity that we could do for downtown, and there's no doubt of the need. So I don't know what else we would need for us to go back and figure that out later on. So these are all logistical questions that I think our staff is fully competent to handle, but I think it's more of a political issue. And 1.3 is a pretty decent down payment on a bond, or would go a long way towards a brand new garage that would actually do what we needed to do. Because in my view, the government should be providing the infrastructure for downtown, and that's a perfect example of the infrastructure that we can be providing for then the economic flourishment of the entire downtown.
And obviously, if it's reconfigured, you might have more than just the post office renting from us on the first floor. That might be retail.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Councilmember Boland.
Alderman Black brought up bonding. I'm assuming if it was built in '74, there's no more bond. I mean, that bond would be paid off.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. At this point, any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And actually, since we've only got 2 minutes here, but I'm going to go ahead and assume, since we're doing a fair amount of discussion, I'm going to just go ahead and take the liberty of Scott, when we get to the end of this, if you just allocate the 20 minutes of our discussion to this so we can just keep going, because we've got several department heads that are continuing, and these presentations are going longer than we had budgeted. Okay.
It's all good stuff, though. So next director, Jay Teslav, Director of Parks and Rec, will go over the next 4 items.
Thanks, Scott. Good evening. I'm going to really speed over the middle two. So Route 66 Trail, that's an IGA with the county. The county manages both those projects. Typically only goes forward if there is federal funding. Then we typically would pay 20%. The county pays 20%, and then that's split over all the municipalities in the county. But I really wanted to spend more and focus on the other two. O'Neill, obviously, you guys have heard me say that everything there is still original. It's all the original equipment. It's a 45-year-old aluminum pool. Aluminum pools typically are to last about 25 years, so we've been working with our magic with gum and spit these days. So that's $738,000 is for design. That's a placeholder for design for a new O'Neill pool. So I wanted to kind of hit that one. The bottom one for me, the zoo project, is $0 from the city. That is a state grant that comes out next Monday that I'll be writing next week, so no pressure, to write a grant for $750,000 for this project. And then the Miller Park Zoological Society board has already voted to put $250,000 towards this project if the state grant comes through. If the state grant doesn't come through, we won't find out till probably January. Then this project is on hold until there is funding. So, but there is no city dollars attached to that. That is new exhibits that will be in place of 3 exhibits and a theater. They'll be torn down and built new exhibits in their place. So those are the highlights I wanted to hit for you guys. But in the last one, there's no city dollars go to that project, even though it says $1 million. I'll take that for any questions.
Questions? Councilmember Craybill.
Thanks, Jay, so much. On the pool, just what goes into that planning for the $738,000? Just on the face of it, it seems.
So that is for all architecture and engineering for that project. So whatever the scope is determined, that's what is. It's a placeholder right now.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Matthey.
Is O'Neill Pool going to open this summer?
Yes. Okay. So we've invested time and money into that so that we can open it this summer.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Black.
So kind of walk me through a little bit of the timeline if we fund the we'll say $750K for the engineering and scope.
You have a question on O'Neill Pool?
Believe it or not, yes, the O'Neill Wave Pool. Wave Pool. I can dream.
Lazy River.
Lazy River. Yeah. So walk me through kind of the timeline of that. So if we were to fund this amount, how we'll be looking at next for the pool to be construction started, groundbreaking. What's the best case scenario?
So right now we're looking at, we need to determine what the scope is. That's first and foremost, depending on how big a project. If it's a replacement of the pool, if it's a larger redevelopment of that park and that part of the park, it all depends on what that scope is. But once that's determined, we'd send out, hire an architect and engineering firm to come in and do the design work for whatever the scope of that project is. We've been looking at, the goal was to be able to close in August, build over the winter, open it that following spring. More and more people we're talked to, if you have a perfect winter, and I mean perfect winter, that's iffy. So I think we're probably going to lose one summer with O'Neill, no matter what we do from a construction perspective. But the idea is, once we design, we're ready to break ground. You know, maybe that's the first, maybe we close it a couple weeks early, like maybe the 1st of August to give us a couple more weeks. But there's a chance we're going to lose a summer once we get there.
And so obviously I'd advocate for the fastest possible way to go about that. But what I was more worried about is that we would get a study and then we'd think about it for 3 years and then maybe decide later. I'm not interested in that. The timeline needs to move very quickly. You've done a great job of extending that facility well past its intended life. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Much of your life. Yeah, Councilmember Emick.
Just a quick follow-up. So what would be the timeline for us to determine the scope, or is that really up to us?
I'll let Tim answer that one.
A couple of comments. Alderman Crable, typically you'll see the design cost is about 10% of the total projected cost. The O'Neill Pool, with a wave with the lazy river and with some sort of, water feature that anybody visiting the park, we know that this is a priority of council. So this is one that we have put this in the 21 budget, thinking that we'll likely get approval for funding and it doesn't become a multi-year discussion. So we fully expect that in the 22 budget we're ready to pull the trigger on the overall project. And then definitely, Councilwoman Eby, to your direct question, the final details definitely have to come in front of council. What does this look like?
Okay. Councilmember Milwaukee.
It's just a quick question. How many more summers can we get out of the pool?
Without doing any more capital towards it?
Right, whatever work you've been doing.
From the work we've done this fall, over the winter, we probably have this year and next year I'm fairly confident of that. Beyond that, every year something else comes up. We're inspected by the state every year, so we basically work off that list because that is what is keeping us from being open. But at some point, like the kiddie pool has been closed for a number of years now. It has already failed. So it's only a matter of time, but I think we've got enough things in place. We've probably got this year and next year is pretty safe, but it's an old pool.
Mayor, I just had an
sure.
additional question.
Councilmember Credo.
Thank you. We've talked about this before, Jay, but with regard to, like with revenue, how much of the operational expenses an O'Neill pool or do we get back from admission fees, and then how much do you expect to get back if the pool's fixed, and then also if the aquatic center is built?
So if right now I want to say we're in like the 17% range for cost recovery now. If we replace what's there, I expect we'll probably be around 20% tops because it'll be the same amenity, just newer. If we go to larger, much more closer to an aquatic center, the feasibility study that we did came back around 80%. I think that's a little high. I would probably expect us around 60% or so, trying to be a little bit more conservative, and I think the price was maybe a little high as well.
So just to clarify that, so if we had an aquatic center, you're saying we would get back more money than we are with our current O'Neill pool?
Yes, but also it costs more money because we have more staff.
Right, gotcha. Councilmember Black.
Yeah, just really quickly, and thank you for that question, Jeff. I know that we've gone down that rabbit hole before, but I really want this conversation to be far away removed now about cost recovery, operational expenses, because it's really hard for us to draw that line of sight between what we could have, because we don't have a scope together, and then what cost recovery might look like, because this isn't an economic development project. I mean, this is a quality of life for an area that absolutely deserves it, and is a facility that we've stretched the life out of, for years and years and years. So I've had phone calls from people who've called me concerned they're not going to be able to afford a pool pass because of, some conversations that we've had publicly about that, and we don't know what we're talking about. Until we do, I think the focus should be what should our scope be and how can we get this project accomplished in the quickest amount of time.
Yeah. But it could be an economic development, depending on project. It could be spillovers, pun intended, with the pool. Thank you so much, Jay. All right.
Mayor, if I could also just remind you to maybe check with
Jen.
everyone.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
In case you
Jen, do you have any questions of Scott? Or, excuse me, Jay. Not Scott's up here, but do you have any questions about O'Neill Pool? Jen? Are you with us? Okay, well, maybe I'll take the silence then as a thank you for reminding me. Scott.
Okay, continuing on. Kevin Cothey, Director of Public Works, will come up and cover the next motor fuel tax, capital asphalt and concrete, water, storm, and sewer. Kevin?
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you about some of these projects. I'm going to try to hit it kind of fast and just open it to questions because I've got 5 of these screens to cover So, starting out with motor fuel tax, a lot of these projects are multi-year projects you're already familiar with. Fox Creek Road Bridge and road improvements carry over from last year. We're getting further along with the railroad now. They finally approved our structure design, so we're getting pre-final plans put together. We need a railroad agreement. We already have the ICC order. We need some more right-of-way, and hopefully we'll get this thing bid in the fall is what our target is. Hamilton Road, another multi-year project that's been going on a long time. What you're seeing up there for the $4.5 million is dealing with land, the right-of-way purchasing, and also the railroad relocation. That next line is just reimbursement on the Phase 2 design. That's already underway. Street lighting charges, that's a part of the budget that we've had in there for a number of years that helps to pay with MFT funds the electricity for both Ameren and Corn Belt streetlights. It doesn't cover all the costs, but covers a portion of it. And then Sheridan Elementary School, Safe Routes to School, that project was approved by the council to use $200,000 of federal money for Safe Routes to School. We show it at $220 just to make sure we have everything covered when we go out to bid this summer with that project. And that's kind of the recap of the motor fuel tax and the capital asphalt and concrete fund. We have $5.8 million for the multi-year street and alley resurfacing program, $1.2 million for sidewalk repair. That includes the ADA ramps. $200,000 for multi-year street, alley, and sidewalk repairs. That's for specific locations that have concerns that we need to address right away. And then, of course, Lutz Road that you're familiar with as well. So before I switch slides, any questions on this slide of projects?
Councilmember Baldwin.
I'm so happy that these road projects are getting done because some of them are safety issues, so I'm very glad about that. And I also want to make it clear that this motor fuel tax is the state motor fuel tax.
Right, right, yeah.
Local.
So the top part there, that top chart is the state motor fuel tax, yes,
Thank
exactly.
you.
It's not the local motor fuel tax.
Some people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Go ahead.
Okay. The next part here, we're going to talk about some projects in the water fund. As you know, we did water master plan, and so a lot of these projects have either been in the works or are part of the water master plan. First off, a rate study. We haven't done a rate study in more than a decade. That's overdue to make sure that we're appropriate with our rates to move forward. Multi-year GIS consultant services. That is upgrading our water system GIS information to make it as useful as possible. We have a lot of stuff in the GIS already, but it needs some refinement to make it more operationally efficient, especially to our guys in the field. We don't have a lot of field access right now. We want to make it web-based and make it usable from mobile devices. Locust Colton CSO elimination, water main replacement. This is a multi-year project. We've done phase 1, but phase 2, hopefully that'll get bid this year. That's a line further down in this list. We also have phase 3, phase 4, the phase 4 design that's shown here. It will also show up in the sewer and storm, so these projects are multi-component out of the different enterprise funds because they include complete infrastructure rehabilitation in those blocks that it affects. Multi-year consultant leak detection, we use that to help find locations where there's underground leaks going on so we can pinpoint the leak and fix it so we prevent water loss out of our system as much as possible. Sunset Drive water main, that includes construction and administration observations. We don't have enough staff to put out there for that project, but that's waiting to be done before we can get in there to resurface the street. Meadowbrook subdivision, the water mains in that area are very old. There's issues with it. There's also issues with the streets in Meadowbrook with the sidewalks and the curb and gutter. This is something that needs to be done before we do the streets, and we'll have to go in and do the streets with new sidewalk, curb and gutter once this project is finished. Pipeline G, that's, as you can tell from A, B, C, D, E, F, G. G is pretty far down the list. These projects started over a decade ago. This is another component that needs to be done in order to improve the 1929 transmission main that was built so that we can pressurize it higher to get better flows to the city and also proper pressure in that main for water quality issues. Fox Creek Road Bridge, that's just the water main on the bridge. That's part of that Fox Creek Road Bridge project. And then Locust Colton we already talked about, water treatment plant, recarbonation bypass design, and then combined studies. We have a lot of things that were identified with the master plan that need to be improved at the plant. These are just some of the things that we're working on, designs to make those things happen. And then the water projects continue on the next slide. PAC, storage and feed facility, that's powder activated carbon. That's construction this year. And then the chlorine gas scrubber construction this year, ammonia system construction. Those are all safety and health improvements for the wastewater or water treatment plant at Lake Bloomington. And then we have reservoir shoreline and stream erosion planning, and then improvements below that. Those deal with making sure that we can protect our shoreline to keep erosion from filling in the lake and taking away volume, and also just help with water quality issues with that soil that would wash in. Watershed improvements also addresses that. The Lake Bloomington Maintenance Facility Construction Upgrade Observation, that deals with replacing the maintenance facility that burned. Multi-year compound meter upgrades, that just makes our system more accurate for those bigger meters that are compound. Water meter test bench that allows us to calibrate and make sure the water meters are functioning correctly. And then the R900 Gateway multi-year installation, that deals with remote fixed point meter reading system. Right now we use mainly a drive-by system process, but this would actually add more fixed point collection systems where we can get real-time readings from the meters on a daily basis. That helps people with move-in, move-outs, and also to identify leaks, potentially a toilet leaking or something like that can also be potentially detected then. And then the water treatment plant, the main boiler needs to be replaced, and so total for those projects almost $8 million. So any questions on these two screens? I know it was a lot to cover in a short time, but a lot of things going on.
Questions, Mr. Covey? Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Great thorough job there.
Okay. Sewer fund, not quite as many projects, but the first one is the multi-year sanitary sewer assessment. What that is mainly CCTV, closed circuit televising, $2.5 million. That's to try to get most of our system televised this year. Assessment of most of the rest of the system to see what's out there and what needs to be addressed. Locust Colton CSOs, those are again the projects. Phase 2 is construction for this year. Phase 4, design for a future phase. And then Sugar Creek Pump Station, force main improvements, design and construction. That deals with our Sugar Creek Pump Station, which is on the southwest side of Bloomington. And that was built in the 90s, late 90s. And it's just time that it needs some rehabilitation. And we also want to make sure that it has redundancy. And what I mean by that is the pump station has 2 pumps, but the force main is only 1 force main. And it's over 15,000 feet long. If something happens to that force main, we have a problem because we'll have to truck the sewage from that until the force main's fixed. So part of the contemplation here is to add in a second smaller force main that gives us redundancies, because we'll have 2 force mains. We can rehabilitate the old force main once we get the new one in, and then we'll be in a better position as a city to serve that side of town. So questions about the sewer fund projects?
Councilmember Matthey and Painter.
Thanks, Kevin. Lots of awesome detail here. I appreciate it. After we get the sewer assessments done and the videotaping done, I mean, how do we go about addressing some of the problem neighborhoods that we've had with the sewer system? You know, we heard from Mr. Reed earlier about problems over on Low Street, and I've heard those plenty of times. There's also problems. It's basically the whole South Hill area, because it's literally on a hill, and the people at the bottom of the hill, like at the end of Oak Street and stuff, are having ongoing issues with flooding as well. You know, how do we get, what's the process look like from moving from these assessments into targeting areas to say, you know, we haven't touched the sewer system in an area like South Hill since, I want to say, the 40s or 50s, and what's the next steps look like after we get the assessment done?
So with the sewer assessment, they rate, they not only video, and we get the video, but they also rate the pipes with the PACP NASCO national standard, and that identifies defects in pipes. And so once we have that information back about the defects in the pipes, we will target those pipes that need to be attended to. Probably first off would be the ones that have critical collapses where they have to be dug and fixed. But then a lot of times in the old parts of Bloomington, we used clay sewer pipes, and the clay is good as long as it doesn't get crushed. And just like a clay flower pot, right? If you drop it, it breaks. Well, the clay pipe will be fine unless something hits it hard or crushes it. And we do find cases where there's clay pipe that is starting to be egg-shaped, and we can go in there and line it a lot of times and use the clay pipe as a hose pipe and put that liner in there, and it's a structural liner that will provide us another 50 maybe to 100 years of life in that sewer or more. A lot of the liner technology today hasn't been in place that long. It's only been in use for about 40, 50 years. So we know it works. Other places that have used them that long, it works. So those will be our priorities, is to get those defects that are made known to us through this assessment fixed first.
Okay. And do you reports of backing of sewers that repeatedly back up from neighborhoods, does that play a factor into the conversation as well somehow?
It does. We track problem areas in Bloomington that have backups and so forth. And in some cases, the assessment may find that there's a blockage somewhere that we hadn't been able to identify yet. But in other cases, we may have to, enhance in some way the sewer systems in those areas. The old parts of Bloomington, as you're well aware, are combination sewers. And so with the combination sewers, if you get too much rain in the sewer too fast, you can back up in basements. And there's various areas of separation that we try to do as well, like the Locust, Colton, CSO. That area, we're trying to avoid the combined sewer overflow, so we're trying to separate the sewers and eliminate that. So we can use those strategies, but it's a gradual process, and it takes time to get through the different parts of Bloomington, because there's a lot of old parts of Bloomington.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, we've once again used up all of our discussion time. In addition, can I have a motion for at least another 10, or how about another 10 minutes, and we'll see how that goes as a target.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Painter, second by Crable. Would you call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Mathey?
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin?
Yes.
Councilmember Milambwe?
Yes.
Councilmember Emig?
Yes.
Councilmember Painter?
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo?
Yes.
Councilmember Black? Councilmember Crable?
Yes.
Councilmember Bray?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And Councilmember Painter was next, and then Emig for questions for Kevin.
Well, I was just wondering, because there are some parts of the city that have no sanitary sewer. They have septic tanks. Is there any plan in the future to lay sewer lines in those areas, or is it even necessary?
That's a great question. And a functioning septic system as licensed by the health department is an acceptable means for, a household to have sewer disposal. So at this point, there isn't. Now, there are areas of Bloomington that have had sewer lines installed, and there are still people on septics, and as those septic systems fail, then they're not allowed to replace their septic system per the Illinois Administrative Code. But that's only if there's a sewer available in front of them that they can connect to. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Emig. Yeah.
Thank you for all of this presentation. So my question is just using your expert judgment of implications when you're able to map all of these sewers, and I know there are miles that we haven't gotten a look at. Are you anticipating that we're going to have quite enormous repairs to make in the future?
There will definitely be repairs to do in the future. I mean, we've, televised not even 50% of the sewers in Bloomington so far. So we know that this big run is going to show a lot of problems that we'll need to address in the coming years. Obviously, the more critical ones, but yeah, there's no doubt.
Exciting reality TV coming to a theater near you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. All right.
One more.
You want to continue?
Yeah, one more. This is the Stormwater Fund, And basically, these are projects that you saw before with the Locust Colton project. This is the third funding component. We got water main, we got sewer, and we got storm that funds those projects. So just any questions on this?
Any questions on Locust Colton? Okay, no, thank you, and appreciate your help, and appreciate your presentation.
Sure.
Thanks.
Next.
I don't know what's coming up each time. Chief Donut,
Okay.
come up and
Great.
give an explanation of drug enforcement funds.
First of all, I'd just like to say I wish I had that deep voice like Kevin Scott because it just sounds really cool to listen to. I can listen to him all night long. So this one's a lot shorter, obviously. First thing I'll comment is that the two projects that we have up here is going to be paid for out of equitable sharing with some investigations we did with the federal government. So this isn't out of taxpayer money. This is just equitable sharing from some investigations that we did. But the first one is a long-term evidence storage facility at the police firing range. About 13, 14 years ago, the state passed a law that said any evidence that you collect based upon a homicide investigation, you have to keep essentially forever. So anytime we collect a car, we have to keep it. And so obviously those take up a lot of space, and we've got, I don't know, we've got probably 10 to 20 cars now, and we have to keep those. And we are out of room and out of space, and so out at the range itself, there was an old clubhouse that was there, and essentially the inside of it and the walls and stuff are in disrepair. Animals have gotten in there, and it's, you know, water leaks, this kind of stuff. So what we plan on doing is knocking that down and simply building a Morton building so that we can store those vehicles like we're legally required to do. So that's the first one. The second one is remodeling an area of the evidence storage room. We've seen an uptick in FOIA applications in recent times, and particularly with videos, especially with body-worn camera videos. That requires a lot more redacting, you know, audio and people's faces, things of that nature. And so this is to create a new office space for the person that handles the FOIA things so that they have a quiet environment to work in and be able to concentrate on those type of things where historically it was about copying records and maybe making copies of disc and stuff. It wasn't as a big deal, but this is part of that equation. So two pretty straightforward things.
Okay.
Any questions?
Questions, Chief Donuts? Okay, thank you. Scott, you want to wrap up?
Well, continuing on with kind of bringing some tangible feeling to all these big numbers we've been talking about. From a service perspective, I was going to run through these. You know, so we were talking about the projects. I think that, you know, it's kind of like a dose of reality right there. Well, here's some more. What is being provided with the dollars that are being spent at the city? So police, 78,000 calls for service. The city manager actually did the math. I don't know if he had a calculator or what, but if he did it in his head, I was very impressed. 214 per day. Fire, 11,400 rescue / fire runs. Parks, we combined all the attendance for rec, aquatics, ice zoo, golf, SOAR cultural, which is the BCPA, but 567. These are all annual. They could fluctuate depending on when we had the last data set, so it could be 2019 or 2018, but in 1 year's period. 567,000 people attended golf events. Maintained 38 parks. You can see all the spray parks, pools, 5 lakes, 30 miles of trail. I don't know if it was the last meeting or the one before. We were discussing replacing trees. And I knew there was something in the budget, but I couldn't remember the number, so I wasn't going to say anything at then. But trees planted per year, 600 is kind of the target at $100 each, so 60 grand. And then almost 6,000 street trees maintained. Community development, this is just one statistic. Of course, there's a lot of other things that are done in that department, but almost 2,300 building permits were issued in a year. Economic development, 305 business contacts made. Facilities, 1 million square feet of facilities maintained, and this is with a very small staff. Library, 329,000 visitors. Arena, 142,000 attendees. And speaking of praises, more public works. We get Kevin up here, but I'll run this. Streets maintained, 103 lane miles. What got my attention was the trash recycling hauled 22.8 tons. It's almost 46 million pounds. I don't really understand what a cubic yard is, but I know this is a big number. So brush hauled, 35,000 cubic yards. And then we were just talking about the sewer and water system. Now, I combine these for space utilization. So these are broken out. I'll get to that in a moment. Resources for the public. But we have this broken out in the CAFR. Sewer water system, 1,100 miles maintained. And then this was on an exhibit that city manager went through a couple of weeks ago or last week. I'm losing track of time now, about accomplishments, but 3.6 billion gallons of water pumped annually. That's 9.8 million gallons per day. So, the citizens, community's dollars at work. This is what's being produced. And then, admin, lonely admin, finance. We have over 30,000 utility accounts, and those are billed every month, and all the payments are processed as well. So 375,000 utility bills processed annually. Clerk, 35,000 phone calls received, 1,400 FOIAs. The FOIAs are something else. Legal, 1,000 administrative courts processed. HR, I think I got a woohoo from Nicole with this one, and Lindsay. 4,000 applications processed with 100 full-time filled. IS, this is out of their narrative. I'll talk about that in a moment too. 3,000 devices supported, 100 applications maintained over 40 locations. They're everywhere. So that was pretty quick. If you have questions about that, I'll have to bring these guys back up. But what I wanted to emphasize was some of that information. There are many resources available for the public. The CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, the audit. Who wants to read the audit? Well, in the back of the audit, it's around page 160, 170, there's a statistical section. And it has a lot of that information that I just went through. Stats on, it's like 10 years of activity too. So you can see the progress of the city and what's done. There's some peer group assessments. Debt, which I wanted to comment on debt. I missed a point I thought of when I was sitting there. There was a slide where it showed $1.7 million transfer for bond debt. That's just a transfer out of the general fund. We actually have about $6 million annual in bond debt service. We have about $58 million of debt outstanding now. But coming back to, I'm kind of skipping down a little bit here, and then I'll talk about the published budget. What references or information is available for the public related to this budget? The budget is so large, it's kind of hard to get your arms around. Well, the budget books, we have these, they're called narratives. There's a write-up on every department, every fund, what's sister cities, how does that work, how did the Connect Transit relationship start, the 1.2 million that we're doing there, McLean County Health. If you're interested, if people are interested in seeing the background, the budget books have information that will help people understand. The numbers get kind of overwhelming sometimes. They're so large. The CAFR, as I mentioned before, the back part of the annual report. Having said all that, the budget's going to be online, the proposed budget as we presented it tonight, by Wednesday. It could be out tomorrow, but I'm committing by Wednesday. The budget books will be available by the end of next week. We have the budget public hearing on the 9th. This is just the proposed. The adopted is scheduled for April 13th. Depending on council's discussions and comments back to us, changes can be made. We'll incorporate those into the adopted. But right now, we're going to publish the proposed budget as it was presented this evening. The other reference I wanted to make to information available to the public are the monthly budget financial reports. They're out on the website as well. So that's showing the current year, where we stand. It doesn't have every fund, but it has the major funds in it as well. Having said all that, and we're out of time, any other questions for me?
Always question. No.
Councilmember Volin and then Milawambe, but if we're going too much longer, I'll ask for another motion.
It's real quick. The 56% funding for the police,
public safety. Yep.
Could you explain what's in there? Is that their like pension or that's
pensions are included in that? Yes,
okay.
There's $11.2 million for the pensions.
Okay, so it's all salary,
full operating
pension.
budgets, yes, including pensions.
Okay, but trucks and all that, that's in capital, correct? The police trucks and
No. So, so like the police.
I mean, the fire trucks and police cars.
We typically put. I mean, we're trying to steer away from using the capital lease, but the debt service is within those departments.
Okay.
So their capital lease, principal and interest expense is included in their budgets.
So it's personnel and supplies are that 56%.
Yes.
Okay. And the other thing, I think the last time you were here talking, you mentioned something about Connect Transit. And what I heard was something about it increases 3% every year, or is that? Well,
I don't have the split in front of me now, but when the increase went into effect, I think it was 2016 with the sales tax increase, the budget, the way we fund the budget, was split into two pieces, capital and operating. It was roughly $500,000 to $600,000 each. I believe it's the capital category. Their ask is going up 5% per year.
Who's ask?
Connect Transit's.
Wants a 5% increase on capital every year?
Yes.
And when did they ask for that?
It's been included in the budget.
Forever?
Well, since that increase for
since 16.
Yeah.
So it's 5% for capital.
Right. So it's being applied to the one portion. So it's roughly $30-some thousand is the increase over prior year.
But the other portion stays
Static.
the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I might have those backwards, but I can get you that split.
No, I'm up to here with Connect Transit.
Okay.
I'm buried with all this stuff. Thank you.
Councilmember Milwamboy.
Okay. Well, thank you. I just wanted to call attention to your slide, budget at work. Don't worry, it's good. And I just couldn't help but be amazed by the numbers, because what really caught my attention, I know the employees do a great job, but when I look at human resources, for example, 4,000 applications processed with 100 full-time filled, and I know that their numbers, I mean, they're fairly smaller staff, small, same thing for legal as well, 1,000 administrative court cases processed. I mean, they're a pretty small staff, and to be able to do that is pretty amazing. So, I know oftentimes people talk about the number of employees that we have in the city, assuming that we have too many, but when you look at, you separate them out and look at how much they produce, it's just pretty amazing. So thank you for that. It helps put that in perspective.
Yeah. And to just note that we're down 200 from 10 years ago.
Yes.
From roughly 850 full-time equivalents to about 650, and we have more people than we did 10 years ago. We'll find out more in the census. Anything else? Thank you so much. We very much appreciate it, and we look forward to the next phase on March 9th. Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you very
tuned.
much.
And we now go to the separate finance director's report. Okay.
We've got more Scott.
We've got more Scott, and then
this is the monthly finance director's report. Scott.
Thank you. We'll make this fast. Bingo. Okay. Very good. So as I indicated, I just want to, I'm going to repeat myself, that these presentations are available on the website. There's also a very detailed monthly report on the website. It's roughly 26, 27 pages, includes exhibits similar to this. This exhibit is not twice as long, but it's longer than this. We picked the top ones for this monthly, and it has some of the major funds, and it shows the capital and the equipment purchases for the year. So I just wanted to highlight that before I jump into this. Similar message as to last month. Utility taxes are under, but stabilized. They really haven't gone any deeper into the red. Food and beverage continues to exceed by a fair margin, $262,000 over budget year to date. And we took the budget up slightly year over year, so that's even more acknowledgement of how well it's doing. Local motor fuel tax
you can see that it is, 100% basic increase over prior year. So, I know tax price is moving, but that is an indicator that people are still purchasing gas, I guess, in the city. I'm going to move fairly quickly here. I had changed the layout of this exhibit last month. I removed basically a column in here that just took the difference between these two. So we've got the revised budget, the year-to-date actual, and the percent of the budget that's used. Really what's driving this exhibit is this projection adjustment column. So if you want to key off anything on this, it's the budget and then the budget adjustments, and that drives this projected year end. So, we started at $88.5 million roughly in taxes. We're looking at a $1.3 million above budget, so 89.8. So that's our projection at this point in time for the year. And then we run that through every one of our major categories. Salaries is coming in under budget, even with the vacancy savings that we had included in 20. Benefits is over, primarily, as I've said in the past, related to the sick leave buyback policy change that we did. And we're also going to incur 4 months of the higher IMRF rate, because that went into effect on January 1st. And what we're projecting right now is a $22.9 million fund balance reserve at the end of the year. I explained this last month, but I want to go over it again. We started at 22.1. We're going to have a $300,000. We're cutting into the fund balance, but it was a planned use of fund balance, and it was restricted. So those were restricted dollars. So it has to affect our unrestricted fund balance is actually going to go up, even though it looks like we have a loss, but it's not really a loss. It was a planned use of fund balance, and it was restricted. And that's the $1 million offset here. So $22.9 million projected at this point in time. For the enterprise funds, just quickly, this budgeted use of fund balance, this was for 20, so some of this is rolling. You can see for water, we had projected at the start of 20 in the budget $8.4 million, $8.3 million in use of fund balance to execute $10 million in projects, $300,000 in sewer, et cetera. The other thing I'll highlight is the revenue trend. We should be at around 75% at this point in time through the year. We're pretty consistent. Sewer, we're under. We missed the budget on that. We just over budgeted. And golf, $1.7 million year to date at this time last year, 1.6 here. So $170 or so thousand under. This kind of coincides, that's 117,000, excuse me, with the note I made earlier during the proposed presentation about the subsidy the general fund is providing or planning, projecting to be necessary for 21 of roughly 130,000. So just revenues are just declining in that fund. Any questions?
Question to Scott on the monthly. Jen, can you hear any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Mr. Gleason, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We've got the upcoming events slide that will be shown on the screen. And as we're looking at this for a couple of minutes, I guess I just want to thank Council for the opportunity to talk about the budget so much, the 18 months that I've been here. It's one that I actually enjoy quite a bit. We're only stewards of taxpayer dollars to the tune of a $230 million budget, in our fiscal year, and appreciate the opportunity. I found a finance director that has taken that directive from me and really has turned any reporting into something that is easy to digest, easy to understand. Scott does an excellent job, so I want to recognize that. The 2019 accomplishments page, Craig, if you would, roll to that one. And we're not going to dive into this. I just wanted to share this was a presentation last year. We've had a fair amount of traffic to the 2019 year in review. Nora is the one that put this document together for us. This will be the last time that I talk about it at a council meeting, but the community can go to our primary website and find the 2019 year in review front and center. And if you dig a little bit, you can get to the 2018 year in review. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank staff and everybody, and obviously Mr. Gleason for all the detailed work that you've all put together for our budget. Obviously, it's critical. We may be toward the home stretch in terms of budgeting. Doesn't mean that there aren't going to be changes and whatever, but we certainly very much appreciate all of what you've done. And I do, just one other thank you is thank Kelly and Councilmember Matthey for really great cupcakes. And happy birthday to Alderman Matthey. And now, since he's told us what year he was born, we know how old he is. Okay. Council comments. Councilmember Bray.
Thank you, Mayor, and again, thank you to city staff for the excellent presentation, and thank you, City Manager Gleason, for shepherding us through the budget process. It's so digestible and understandable because of your talent and skill in explaining these numbers to us. But I think what should become clear to everyone in the city of Bloomington and the surrounding community is the value proposition that has been presented to us. The numbers are big, but the value is being delivered to the citizenry. And so I'm proud to work with you to execute on all your great ideas, and thank you so much for bringing all your skills and abilities to the city of Bloomington and to our citizens. And we've got a lot of really interesting and exciting things to do in the years to come. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Crable.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just add on to what Alderperson Bray said, and I think it was very something that was very robust, and don't think we've had something like that before. Great idea to bring the directors up to talk about that part of the budget, and you can talk about the budget enough. So certainly agree with all that. I wanted to also mention that I had a listening session about Connect Transit last week at Lifeso. We had a really good attendance. I appreciate Isaac and Martin from the executive team at Connect Transit was there. Fortunate enough to have Donna join me as well as a council member from Normal. We also had a couple of people from the working group in attendance, and Steve from the working group, I thought he made a very good statement. He said, you know, public transit is an expression of who we are as a community and how we treat our residents, and I know that we're going to be having discussions on that in the coming weeks. So, and then one other thing, maybe you guys have all been to the ARC that was discussed earlier. But I've been there. You haven't been there. It's just a great facility, and I'm glad that both people from Normal and Bloomington are able to use that. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Matthey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to let everybody know that the March 9th meeting, I'm going to be out of town traveling for work, and I'm going to try to call in, but with the schedule, I don't know that it's going to be possible. Also, for everybody who's still here, those cupcakes do not need to come back to my house because I'll eat them all myself. So please eat cupcakes before you leave.
And just say they are really excellent. Councilmember Boland.
I'd just like to back up what Jeff said. Both of us have been involved with the Connect to the Future working group. We've gone to meetings and talked to people, and the working group approved their proposals, recommendations, and tomorrow the board, I believe, is voting on the recommendations, and then they'll be coming to the council sometime in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you for not only the update, but thank you both for tracking it down and kind of helping to be our liaison to Connect Transit as we're moving forward. But anyway, you wanted to. Oh yes, Jen. Any council comments?
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to, ditto on all the shout outs to the staff and all the work that they have done around the budget. And I wanted to just mention a couple of things that we're going to be doing. So I have another one of my community council meetings coming up on March 12th at 6 p.m. at Miller Park Zoo. It'll be in one of the classrooms. And so we've had pretty good attendance for all of those events. There will be childcare available. And so really hoping that people can come out. We're going to be talking about the census and the budget. So if you want to dive in deeper than we did tonight, that's a perfect space to do that. The other thing is that, some of the feedback that I got from my constituents is that, as much as staff do a lot of work to make the information accessible, there are still a lot of people in our community that are not financially literate to a point that they can tune into the finance director's discussions and really kind of pick up where we start. And so for that purpose, Council Member Crable and I are going to be holding a popular education session around the budget. It won't be so specific as to, all the proposals of this year, but it will be more general around how the city budget works. And so with the support of staff, we are working on a curriculum, and we are inviting folks to help us get the word out about that. It's going to be at Wayman AME at noon on Saturday, March 28th. And again, the purpose of that is to explain this in a way that, like your ninth grader could get it or your next door neighbor could get it. So it's not going to be for folks who are really, really deep into the budgeting stuff and are following along, that's probably not the space for you. But if you feel a little intimidated by some of the big numbers, we're being very intentional about making that a space that is really accessible to folks in our community. So, and I think that's all I have.
Just if I could clarify again, on the March 12th, what time is your meeting?
6 p.m.
And you said it's in Miller Park?
Yes, in Miller Park in one of the classrooms.
In the pavilion?
No, in the zoo.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, in one of the zoo classrooms, Miller Park Zoo.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that then for the record. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, at this point, is there a motion to adjourn? Very quick. Moved by Alderman Black. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Bray. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Take care, Jen.
Thank you.